Do you know that your PSU might be responsible for killing efficiency of your custom low-power PC or NAS? Well, let me give you some insight into why that might be. I bought this ASRock N100M motherboard to make a low-power NAS. The equipped Intel N100, it just sips the electricity with its 6 watts TDP. But that alone isn't enough, because you can't grab any old random power supply from your spare PSU bin and make it a day. I will show you some examples in this video. There is an important concept when it comes to power supply, especially for low power usage, or load we might say. Even if you use one with a gold or platinum, or even better certification, it might not matter in some situations. PSU usually shares a similar efficiency curve among each other, like the one I'm showing here. Now, your attention should be focused on the first 2 to 20% range. Power supplies aren't very efficient at that load. The optimal place to be is at around 50%, and it is where you get the most bang for your watts. Now, I'm exaggerating here for the sake of the example. Imagine that you put in your DIY low-power NAS, a 1000-watt PSU, but you use only 20 to 30 watts at idle. Let's change the graph from load to watts and see where our typical max 50 watts consumptions ends up. Do you notice something bad? Yes, exactly. With our low power usage, we will probably land in the 60 to 70% efficiency, and I think I can somehow prove it. Of course, the reality is that you will still have to navigate situations with both good and poor quality power supplies regardless of this, which ultimately led me to put 5 different PSUs to the test to find out which one would be the most energy efficient for my personal use case. Before checking the numbers, I would like to explain why I went with the ASRock N100M, instead of one of those NAS boards that you can find on AliExpress and some on Amazon too. Well, it comes down to cost. Even though I would like to have one of those, they are a little more expensive than the ASRock that I choose. The real deal breaker right now is the memory. Almost all of them require DDR5 SODIMM RAM, and I don't have a spare DDR5 kit lying around, and the current price for those is a little crazy right now. As some of you might have noticed, DDR prices are out of control thanks to the AI boom. I don't want to pay the current AI tax. DDR5 and even DDR4 are a luxury right now. So I picked this specific ASRock motherboard because it uses DDR4 and I can steal a module from another of my system I have. That has 2 sticks, 0 cost for memory, which made the ASRock the logical choice for my poor wallet. Can we look at the numbers yet? In a moment, let's see the contenders first. I don't want to spoil the results, so I'll just present them without commenting too much on their quality or performance. There is the Tations 500 watts from 2022, a 300 watts LC power from around 2015. This Corsair C X500 from 2012. The EVGA Supernova G2 650 watts from 2017, and a very old PSU 300 watts from 2005. Maybe? I'm not sure. This chart highlights the idle power consumption for each unit, tested with only the boot SSD connected. The 300-watt LC power emerges as the winner. Despite its silver rating, it comfortably edges out the gold EVGA Supernova in this specific test. It is important to note that this isn't because the LC power is a superior power supply overall. Rather, this is a classic demonstration of PSU efficiency curves. Most power supplies see a significant drop in efficiency when the load is extremely low relative to their total capacity, as I explained before. Because the Supernova is a 650 watts unit, an idle load represents a tiny percentage of its ceiling, pushing it outside of its optimal efficiency range. We see this same principle with the Corsair unit. Despite its bronze rating, its 500-watt capacity is a better match for these low loads than the 650 watts EVGA. However, capacity isn't the only factor. The 500-watt Tations performs poorly regardless, which is a clear indicator of its lower build quality. As for the ancient FSP, it is quite old, just leave it at that. This chart reflects a more realistic workload, incorporating 3 additional hard drives to mirror my intended setup. As the power draw increases, the EVGA Supernova's quality begins to manifest, and it is now performing on par with the Corsair. The LC power still maintains a slight lead for the moment, while the usual suspects continue to underperform significantly by comparison. To wrap up the test, I decided to put some load on the CPU using Cinebench. As the load starts climbing, the Supernova begins to pull ahead and clearly outshine the Corsair. If we pushed the system even harder, it would probably stretch that lead even further. But that's not really the goal here. We're focusing on low load behavior, not full stress testing. LC still keeps a slight edge, although the margin is getting pretty small at this point. The Tasons and the FSP, on the other hand, let's just say their performance here is memorable. Just not for the right reasons. So what does all this mean in the real world? A few watts might not sound like much, but remember, a NAS usually runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That means even small differences in efficiency can slowly add up over the course of a year. Let's take the idle scenario with 3 hard drives, which is probably the most realistic baseline for a home NAS. Considering the power consumption I showed before, if your electricity costs around 0.3 euro per kilowatts hour, which is common in many parts of Europe, here's what that looks like while running 24/7 for a full year. Tasons, about 381 kilowatts hour per year, roughly 114 euro. Corsair CX500, about 328 kilowatts hour, around 98 euro. LC Power, about 307 kilowatts hour, roughly 92 euro. So just by choosing a more efficient PSU for this kind of low power system, you could save around 20 euro per year compared to a poor match. And if your NAS stays online for 5 years, that difference becomes 100 euro or more, which is basically the price of another decent power supply. Of course, these costs are based on idle numbers. In reality, your NAS won't always be idle. Sometimes it will be streaming media, copying files, scrubbing disks, rebuilding arrays, or running containers. During those moments, the system power draw goes up, and the PSU efficiency curve moves along with it. So in practice, the real yearly cost will likely be a bit higher than these estimates, and the differences between power supplies may also grow slightly depending on how often your system is under load. Now, of course, this doesn't mean you should always buy the smallest PSU you can find. Build quality, protections, and reliability still matter a lot. But what it does show is that oversizing a PSU too much for a low-power system can quietly waste energy every single day. The tricky part is that finding good low-wattage power supplies has actually become harder in recent years. Most modern PSUs start at 500 or even 650 watts because the market is mostly focused on gaming PCs and GPUs that can pull hundreds of watts on their own. One interesting alternative for ultra-low power systems like this is something like a Pico PSU paired with an external power brick. These tiny DC-DC power supplies are designed specifically for systems that only need a few dozen watts, which could potentially put them much closer to the efficient part of the curve for a NAS like this. Unfortunately, I don't have one available to test right now, but it would definitely be interesting to include one in a future comparison to see how it stacks up against traditional ATX power supplies in a real NAS setup. So if there's enough interest, that might be something worth exploring in a future video. Remember, when your system only uses 30 or 40 watts, the power supply you choose can make a surprisingly big difference. See you soon, and thanks for watching.